The agenda pack with papers is available by mod.gov or directly from the council website, and the link has been sent out to members and is available to members of the public. When I invite someone to speak, could you please state your name for the benefit of anybody who's listening to the meeting so that I can identify who you are and regarding the points you make. Can I also warmly welcome any members of the public and media who are joining us here today. There are no planned fire drills, and if the alarm does sound, please follow the Democratic Service officers out of the building. The meeting is now being recorded and will be available online shortly or after the meeting. And finally, as agendas are now viewed electronically, could I kindly request that members and officers refer to the page numbers from the published agenda pack to assist all in finding the appropriate information. Okay, so we move straight on to the meeting. Item 1 is apologies. Jamie, have you any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, committee. We have received apologies from Councillor Aulia, Councillor Price-Sankey, Councillor Reid and Councillor Hobbs, for whom Councillor Hobhouse is substituting. Councillor Power is running a little bit late, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other apologies that we're aware of? No? Good. Right, item 2 are the minutes of the previous meeting that was held on the 8th of December. They have been circulated. Are there any questions about them, or are you happy for me to sign them as a... Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Andy. So they're proposed by Councillor Cole, seconded by Councillor Kendall, and I will sign them now. Okay, item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest from members in respect of the agenda? Councillor Pearce.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Agenda item 6. I'm a member of the Homes in Somerset board. I think it's a personal interest. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Dudridge.
Yeah, identical to Councillor Pearce. Item 6, I'm a board member of Homes in Sedgemoor.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Ham.
The same as the
other two. Okay, all right. Well, we're a well-informed committee this morning then. Good. Any other declarations of interest? Okay. Right. Item 4 then is public question times, and we have Mr. Nick Hall from the Glastonbury area, or Pilton, I think, who has some questions to ask us concerning the festival. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Hall. If you press the button, it should turn red. And away you go, and Dave Coles is here to provide a response, and I'll say a few words as well.
Thank you, Chair.
Please proceed.
So, good morning, committee. So my name is Nick Hall. I'm a Pilton Parish Councillor, but I'm making this speech in a personal capacity. My statement about the 2025 Glastonbury Festival debrief report and UK government's licensing reform programme was published as part of today's agenda. I'm sorry I couldn't be at your December meeting to answer the questions directly, or at least raise the questions directly. I'd like to highlight 2 key issues. Firstly, public nuisance issues are being downplayed. And secondly, there's a lack of a fit-for-purpose community consultation model. So firstly, public nuisance issues are being downplayed, and that's putting it mildly. Serious traffic and noise complaints are dismissed in the report. For example, details of noise complaints have not been provided to this committee. Regarding helicopters, the CAA state that it is the Department of Transport's responsibility to deal with complaints about helicopters. They in turn state it is Somerset Council and/or GFEL. Instead of everyone passing the buck, perhaps the Scrutiny Committee could take the lead and establish which regulatory authority will handle complaints about helicopters at the 2027 festival. Regarding off-site events, there are serious issues with individual events, and there is the cumulative impact of 30+ off-site events around the festival site. It appears that temporary event notices, so-called TENs, are the only legal means to control these events. And I'd like to ask the question, has Somerset Council ever refused a TENs application? So secondly, the lack of a fit-for-purpose community consultation model. Somerset Council's inability to address these public nuisance issues is largely, in my opinion, due to the lack of a fit-for-purpose community consultation model. And it isn't just during the festival week. For example, 3 weeks before the festival, GFEL built a 5-metre high temporary pedestrian bridge over a public road, Cockmill Lane, without any consultation with our community. Other large festivals have embraced better council-led consultation models for their communities. On the 26th of November 2025, a national licensing policy framework was introduced by the Labour government. This framework expects problems to be resolved in a collaborative way and for early engagement and mediation with communities. So let's start. We have an opportunity ahead of the 2027 festival to use this new framework to help create a fit-for-purpose and, dare I say, world-class consultation model for the communities around the Glastonbury Festival site. That's all I've got to say. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, thank you. I was just about to say that for 3 minutes. Thank you very much for that. Dave Coles, I think you're happy to respond.
Yeah, that's good. I've obviously you sent the questions in prior to the meeting, so I've gone through those and I've got a written response. So what I'm going to just do is read that out because that obviously saved time. So what I'll do, I'll put it on screen so you know which bits I'm referring to in terms of questions. So in terms of the first question about obviously the number of people on site and the number of adults and so forth, the response to that was the licence allows attendance at each event of up to 210,000 people in relation to those who are 13 years old or above. We do not have a breakdown of specific age categories for those on site. Children are only permitted, however, to enter or leave the festival site when accompanied by a responsible adult, which forms part of the event's safeguarding controls. As detailed in the 2025 Scrutiny report, the festival has comprehensive children's safeguarding measures in place. These include year-round safeguarding lead, an on-site child safeguarding consultant, dedicated safeguarding and welfare support team during the live show, comprehensive induction and training for staff and volunteers, including quick reference guides, safeguarding champions in each area as points of contact, family-specific camping areas with stewards and monitoring, strong communication links with statutory and external agencies via clear escalation framework, and clear guidance on child-restricted areas publicised on-site and via the festival website/app. And we've also, obviously, the council safeguarding, children's safeguarding team have been involved in the run-up to the festival as well. In relation to the helicopter noise, the response is there is considerable public consultation in relation to the festival. Oh no, hang on, that's not, no, sorry, this is about the, oh yeah, this is about the consultation model, sorry. There is considerable public consultation in relation to the festival. Parish council meetings are attended by GFEL representatives and, where required, Somerset Council officers, either by prior arrangement or at the request of the relevant parish council in the areas surrounding the festival site. Local residents in these communities are provided with contact details of the GFEL village liaison manager and team, enabling them to raise concerns in the lead up to the festival. In addition, a dedicated 24/7 village hotline operates throughout the duration of the event, offering residents a direct means to report issues or seek assistance. In 2025, Somerset Council introduced a councillor engagement session for local ward councillors, held both before and after the festival. These sessions allow councillors to present community concerns directly to council officers and strengthen communication between the council, elected members and festival organisers. Following each event, a scrutiny committee is also convened, providing councillors with the opportunity to review the operation of the festival. The meeting is open to the public, who may attend to ask questions or address the committee. Alongside these structured consultation and feedback processes, both the council and the licensing team remain accessible throughout the year through the standard contact channels published on the council's website. Given the breadth of these engagement mechanisms, it is considered a robust and adequate level of consultation and engagement is undertaken in relation to the festival. In relation to the question about helicopters, the response is, as discussed previously at scrutiny committees, the environmental health team is unable to deal with noise nuisance from aircraft, including helicopters, as it is specifically exempted from the Environmental Protection Act. Therefore, there is no action that we can take with regard to this issue. As previously advised, we feel that this is an issue for the Civil Aviation Authority to investigate if aircraft are being flown in a manner that does not comply with relevant aviation regulations. In terms of the off-site campsites and cumulative impact, the response is, prior to the festival, a briefing event was held for off-site campsite operators, which was attended by officers from regulatory services. All of the off-site campsites were visited in 2025 by officers from regulatory services while the festival was operating to check compliance and provide advice. Where complaints are received about off-site campsites during the festival, regulatory services officers will undertake to visit as appropriate to check compliance. Therefore, the council has continued to input appropriate resources into this issue, and with the introduction of the pre-festival briefing session, additional step was introduced in 2025. In relation to has the council ever refused tens, I'm not aware of any in recent years. Obviously, I can't say sort of going back decades, but that is in relation to the festival. Obviously, there are instances across the district where tens are submitted and objections are received by responsible authorities that result in the in a 10 application being refused or not processed. Do these events have do these off-site events require safeguarding policies? A formal safeguarding policy is not a requirement of tens. However, things like our sale of alcohol and so forth would still be governed by the licensing objectives, i.e. challenge 25 and so forth, to make sure that the alcohol element is dealt with. And I think it's useful to note, as we said at the scrutiny committee before Christmas, the tens only cover the licensable activities, so things like sale of alcohol and regulated entertainment. It doesn't cover the camping aspect as such. And what is the environmental impact of the 30+ sites? So cumulative impact. The response to that is, this is not an issue that regulatory services are in a position to answer, since it is not a consideration of tens. The only statutory objectives against which the police or environment protection can object to a 10 are the licensing objectives. In addition, tens are considered on their own individual merits. The Licensing Act does not provide for licensing authorities to adopt cumulative impact policies for tens. However, issues such as noise nuisance from individual sites will be investigated if complaints are received and proactive visits are undertaken while the festival is operating to check compliance, provide advice to operators, etc. In relation to the question around licensing reform programme, I spoke to the licensing manager about this, and the response to that is, we are confident that the principles outlined in the guidance are already embedded in the way our licensing services deliver its functions and reflected in our statement of licensing policy, to the extent that a revision before 2028 is not deemed necessary. However, as with all matters, we will continue to keep these issues under review to ensure our approach remains consistent with the emerging national guidance and best practice.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Thank you very much. Chris, did you want to add anything or no? Okay. Right, I'll sum up. Well, thank you, Mr. Hall, and thank you, Dave, for the responses. I'm assuming that Mr. Hall will receive those responses in writing, because there was
that's great. Yeah,
quite a comprehensive response there. Clearly, Glastonbury being such a big international global event on our doorstep is always going to raise issues around and about. And some of them seem to be coming back on a relatively regular basis. But I've just had a chat with Mr. Hall before the meeting, and I think we both agreed that the thing is moving forward. It's not a regressive situation. And of course, we now have an 18-month hiatus in order to look at what's gone before and see what improvements can be made. I think one of the things that does bother me particularly is the offsite events only being controlled by a temporary event notice, which is relatively limited in its scope, as you've just pointed out. These are the things, you know, for 21st birthday parties or weddings in somebody's back garden over a weekend, rather than a 4 or 5 day camping extravaganza attached to Glastonbury. And particularly, I think the chair of the Children's Scrutiny Committee was here a couple of meetings ago and was concerned about children's safeguarding. And if there is no requirements for safeguarding on these off-site areas, then that is potentially a loophole that needs to be looked at. Mr. Hall's view is that the consultation model is inadequate. Your view is that it's fit for purpose. So I think there's probably a little bit of movement to be looked at on that. I think what's really interesting me is this new national licensing framework. And Dave, you feel that we're compliant with it already. And I think it's something that this scrutiny committee could well have a look at to see what the new framework is saying and examine it against our policies just to make sure that we're as tight as we can be on this. In relation to the safeguarding issues I alluded to before, I'm not quite sure where we can go with this unless you start to lobby the government to regard these satellite events as part of the wider festival and falling within the licensing requirements of that festival. That on one hand sounds very sensible, but on the other hand sounds like a complete sledgehammer to crack a nut. So I'm not quite sure where the way through is on that one, but I think that's something we need to consider. I think the final point is, of course, that this committee is being subsumed into climate and place in the new municipal year from the 1st of April. Is that right? 1st of May. And so therefore this will fall under the responsibilities of a new committee. And I think one of the things we're discussing later is what work we highlight to go forward to the new committee. And I think this is a continuing focus on Glastonbury because it is so big and it is so important. I think we'll be part of that. And I think we need to give a sort of comprehensive handover in relation to that, to the issues that have been raised, how we're dealing with them, to make sure that we always keep an eye on the ball. Unless anybody else has anything to add, Henry?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm subbing today. I wasn't part of the committee when you looked at this in December. I represent Castle Carey Station, and we have a major problem now, and it's going to get worse because both car parks are now full daily. And the number of people travelling from Castle Carey to, in my case, Taunton or London is increasing dramatically, and GWR are looking to put a third car park in. Now, that creates the problem during Glastonbury that they close the main car park to put the buses in it to enable the people to get away. They are putting in a new walkway over the rails, which has been partially funded by the EBISs and by the Newt. And that's going to have lifts, which is going to mean it's much easier for disabled people to get from the trains onto the buses. But this year, the cafe was closed because it couldn't cope with the influx, and we had people parking on the road again. I don't quite know how you're going to deal with it, because if Carey gets a lot more popular, quite frankly, it doesn't want to be the home of Glastonbury Pop Festival, as it was in the paper.
Okay, thank you, Henry. I think from our point of view here, we are dealing with the sort of the licensing aspects of the festival itself, and we have had presentations from Highways. They have attended meetings in the past in terms of how they deal with it, and I mean, it's just an enormous influx of people in a very short space of time. So it's quite difficult to see how this can be solved on a temporary basis. Dave, did you have something to add to that?
Well, I was just going to I just needed to raise a point of clarification on the temporary event notices, just for the record that those off-site campsites, which have tents, are not operated or owned by Glastonbury Festival. So they are separate entities in case there's any confusion. They're third-party operators.
Yeah, yes, I appreciate the point, but of course they are only there because of the festival, which it prevents a bit of a problem. Anyway, it's something we need to look at. Councillor Andy Kendall.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one. The acronym, I don't know what it is. GE something EL.
Glastonbury Festival Events Limited.
Thank you very much. And just one more question. This thing with the Civil Aviation Authority, the buck stops with them to you know, I should find the word to say. Police the helicopters and all this. In your answer, you're saying it all adds up to Civil Aviation Authority. Is that it then? Is that it? We just leave it to them, and it either gets policed or it doesn't.
Well, from a regulatory services point of view, I have no powers to deal with noise nuisance from helicopters. So my understanding is that if people are flying their helicopters in accordance with the law, then I don't know, the Civil Aviation Authority may not have powers to deal with it. If people are flying inappropriately or doing things against aviation law, then I'm assuming they can investigate. The reason we haven't got powers is because it's specifically exempted. Because I think if you take, for example, we've lived next to Heathrow Airport, with planes coming in sort of 15 hours a day, 365 days a year, right over the top of your house, then it would be impossible to run an airport if we had powers of nuisance to deal with it. So the same, and it's a blanket approach. You cannot, if a helicopter is flying or a plane is flying, we cannot sort of intervene and say, oh, we want you to use less thrust when you're taking off because you're making too much noise, because obviously that's not going to work, is it? And planes are, if they've got permission for an airport, they're inherently noisy, aren't they? So, and the same applies to helicopters in flight. I haven't got any power to deal or direct helicopters to how they fly, or to, it's like I say, it's specifically exempted under the legislation. So the only thing I can see is to raise it with the Civil Aviation Authority. And they may not be able to deal with the noise aspect in some respects, because it will be the same issue. A plane will make a noise if it's taking off and landing that it has to make to get off the ground. But if people are flying inappropriately or dangerously, then the Civil Aviation Authority, I understand, would have powers to look at that.
Yeah, I think it's quite tricky, because I understand that they have altered the flight path, but of course altering the flight path only takes the noise somewhere else. If it's correct that you're getting sort of 30, 40, 50 helicopters coming in over a daily basis over your back garden, it can't be much fun. But this is again another example of the national licensing program being inadequate to deal with an event like this. And I mean, what you're almost saying is that we should have delegated powers within national legislation to deal with things on a local basis. I have a feeling that government might sort of gulp a little bit at that proposal. I don't know. Tom, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, no, it's only just a quick one. I haven't got an answer now, but just touching on the Glastonbury Festival subject that I raised, I think it was a couple of months ago at the last scrutiny meeting, and I've also raised it at full council and at exec. It's just regarding the police report that still haven't been sent, regarding the comments that were made on stage. But you haven't got to give me an answer now. Obviously, I know it's a bit of a touchy subject, but it will still just be nice to just see if I can get an answer finally. Thank you.
All right. Okay. These were the controversial remarks made. I don't know.
My understanding was that the police have not proceeded with any formal action.
All right. Thank you very much for your contributions, Mr. Hall. Thank you very much for coming in, fighting your way across the levels, and nice to see you. And we'll draw this to a close. I'm sure this or another committee will be focusing on Glastonbury in the future, without a doubt. But we'll now move on to agenda item 5, which is the community's outcome tracker, which is on our agenda. Now, if you look at the the sort of final one. It's all about the work programme. So what I was going, when I got there, I was actually going to roll the work programme item into this as well, because it seemed to flow quite well. Right, so if you'll see from the traffic lights that the greens are completed, the oranges are pending, and the reds are incomplete. There are no reds on our list. The first one is from August, is a traveller site meeting, and I think the discussion of travellers and van dwellers around Glastonbury is intended. We're having a report in March, so that's at our next meeting. Yes, Tom.
Yeah, no, just touching on that, because Councillor Hart, apologies, she can't be here. She's hurt her ankle, and then Councillor Denton was meant to ask this question, but she just wanted me to just raise this, and obviously now it's being mentioned, it's going to come. I think you said it was March. It's going to be raised, but she just asked me to say, and I wanted to just speak on her behalf. She said that Councillor Hart has previously asked Chris Hall for a report on the travelling community and an update on Somerset Council plans for traveller sites. This has been reiterated by the chair on one or more occasions. Therefore, when is this scheduled to happen? So obviously that's going to be March. So I just wanted to raise it on her behalf. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The Octagon Theatre, the November action is green, so we'll leave that one. Marcus?
That's right. Sorry, I've just read the final bit. It was about the local bus services to be dealt with by Climate and Place Committee once the new.
Yeah, can we just work our way down to that and we'll deal with that? Yeah. Okay, 17th September, the work programme, the van dwellers issue, Rainbow Way in Minehead was covered at the December meeting. And that Rainbow Way turns up again, the next item. So I'm not quite sure why the second Rainbow Way is due to come back in March. I'm assuming that's a mistake because we dealt with it in December, didn't we?
Yeah, I'm not aware of there being any outstanding actions in relation to Rainbow Way.
Okay, so that's green. The van dwellers, of course, we just discussed. Local bus services, the next one is local bus services considered by the Climate and Place Committee or the new merged committee, and that's one of the things we'll be handing over. Housing updates, AWAB's law. Now, AWAB's law came in at the beginning of November, am I right?
Peter might be able to give us a better reflection of the actual date, Peter.
Yeah, October.
So I think it's a little bit premature to have a report on how it's working, and that's probably something that we'll consider passing on for the new committee to have a look at. The underspends has been dealt with. Octagon Theatre update. Andrew is with us today, and we're going to come back after planning. Planning's been submitted, I understand, and I don't know when it's coming to Planning Committee South, but I think we were going to have just an update as to how things were progressing. I don't want to press you because you're probably not prepared for it today.
No, so it's going to Planning South at the end of, scheduled to go to Planning South at the end of February. So I didn't envisage coming back to this meeting on the Octagon after that.
Okay, that's fantastic. Thank you very much. The work programme. Yes, right. We'll now move on to the work programme. So if there are any outstanding items on our work programme, ARB's law is one of them, and local bus services is the other. We'll pass those on to the new committee. The new committee will not have a chair or membership agreed until the annual meeting, council meeting in third week in May or something. Yeah. So we're just going to have to leave that in the safe hands of Democratic Services, which I'm sure will be fine. Yes, Marcus.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'm now in the right place to bring this up. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the local bus services. I'm can't quite remember exactly what that's covering. My concern would be we're now in beginning of February. You've got a new chair in May. I mean, I think if you'd speak to anybody, local bus services would be up there on the list of things that we need to look at. I mean, you know, it wouldn't be a scrutiny meeting if I didn't mention the fact that you can't get a bus from Minehead to Bridgewater. All roads don't necessarily lead to Taunton, and that's the huge issue for people living in West Somerset. There is obviously a current Hinckley bus service that runs 3 times a day. Really needs a scheduled bus service, and of course we're knocking this down the road to a new committee, which that won't be formed till, as you say, May. it might not necessarily get on all of a sudden. What my concern is that we're going to be sat here in October time and we're talking about it then, and before you know it, we could have a change of council in 14 months' time, and suddenly it's got knocked down the road again. And it doesn't make, for people like myself who can drive backwards and forwards, that's fine. For people who actually need the bus services, it's very essential, and I do think we want to do everything we can to make sure that is moved up, whether if it can't be dealt with this committee in time, whether it can be dealt with ASAP.
Okay, Chris, did you want to have anything on that?
Yeah, so it will transfer across to the forward plan of the new consumed committee. I think what we really need from this committee, though, is a clear scope of that report. So at the moment, I'm unclear what exactly is being requested to be brought forward so that we can ensure the debate fits the objective. So it'd be helpful, not necessarily right now, but if we could have a discussion about the scope of that.
Right, well, I think that sounds like a good idea to put on the agenda for next time, just to sort of get because this isn't just a West Somerset problem. I guess it's an issue wherever we are. I mean, one of the things for me is the sort of reliability of it, and it's not entirely down to the bus companies, but because they have issues with access and people badly parking and things like that. So I think I think we'll try and draw together and see what can be done. I remember in the old Somerset Western Taunton days, I think we did get first to come and talk to the committee and explain how the business worked and what efforts they were doing to improve the service. So I think that can be on the agenda again. But as Chris says, I think we do need to sort of get our ducks in a row as to exactly be looking at whatever it is we're trying to reveal. Okay, if we can now turn to agenda item 8, which is the work programme. You'll see there's only one page of it. So today we're looking at the landlord service options appraisal, which we'll do in a moment. And then there's the annual report for communities from Frederica. And next time, the 26th of March, we got the travellers and the van dwellers, the Octagon Theatre update. And it sounds like we're going to have a discussion about bus services, reflections on bus services in Somerset. And at the moment, we've got nothing down for our April meeting other than tying up all the loose ends and sending a nice package off to the new committee. Are there any other items that we've missed? We've got on the bottom Westlands Entertainment venue, and for the life of me, I can't remember why we were discussing that. So if somebody can refresh my memory, that would be good.
Yeah, I think given the abbreviation ahead of it, that was to do with the budget savings proposals that were put forward a number of years ago. So CMS 038 relates back to a budget report. That budget saving proposal was to transfer the operation of Westlands and to be transferred the staff from Somerset Council across to Yeovil Town Council. That has happened. I wonder whether this is here because there are still some matters coming out of the novation of the contract and the transfer of the lease, because we Somerset Council lease it from Westlands or Leonardo's as they now are. So it might be that it was to tie up a loose end. Now, I'm not sure that there is anything of sufficient value to be discussed because that devolution matter is being dealt with and is in train. The staff did to be transferred across and Yeovil Town Council are delivering those services, but it's not for me to remove it from your forward plan, Chair.
Okay, are there any specific Yeovil members here? Andy?
Thank you, Chair. The only thing that concerns me is what's in the news at the moment about the medium lift helicopter. If the contract doesn't go through, I'm not saying it's a fact. Rumours are that they may terminate the lease, the break clause. Are we ready for that? Are we? How would that affect us, or how would it affect anything?
Right. If Chris could explain the tenure arrangements, Westlands, the entertainment venue, I guess, is owned by Leonardo, and we rent it, or is it? And is the intention to pass it on to Yeovil Town Council in due course when all the I's are dotted and T's crossed?
Yes, I can't give you any more detail than is in the public domain already around the medium-term helicopter contract arrangements and the pressure that's being applied to government to try and resolve that. If that isn't resolved in a satisfactory manner, I can't say what Leonardo will do. That will be a choice for them as to how they operate their business. But in regards to Westlands as a venue, the freehold is owned by Leonardo's and Somerset Council have a lease of that land and on which we operate, or rather the town council now operate, the Westlands entertainment venue. So there is a connection here, but there's too many unknowns around that contract to be able to determine what might or might not happen to the venue. Now, Westlands is very successful, as you will know. I'm sure many of you have been there. It's a very modern facility operating well and is doing very well for the town council. So I'm sure that we and the town council would be negotiating with Leonardo's to ensure that that provision is retained. In terms of the wider context of the company, we have nothing more than is already in the public domain.
Okay, Chris, and to just clarify, so we have a lease from Leonardo and we sublet to Yeovil Town Council? If that's the case, how long is the head lease?
I don't have that in front of me today. We can get you those answers, but yes, that's the process that we are attempting to novate in a more formal manner across the Yeovil Town Council, but I'll have to get you the exact lease terms.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I think it's probably wise to keep a watching brief on that as things develop. I mean, without the Leonardo complication of the helicopter, I think there'd be little to worry about. But actually, if there are going to be changes, then it might be, well, who knows what's going to happen. Sorry, Andy, do you want to come back?
Just a quick one. I did ask, are we ready for this break clause? It may or may not happen. We're aware of it, aren't we?
I'm going to get you a solid answer, because I'm not sure what preparation we are doing on the basis that we are attempting to novate it. So it may not be that it's a break clause directly to us. The novation will determine who effectively becomes the landlord, who effectively becomes the leasee. So it may be us, or it may be going directly to Yeovil Town Council. So I need to get you a better answer, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll keep a watching brief on that one. And the final bullet point is library proposals. Now, there seems to have been, I've been aware of moving behind the scenes proposals about library in relation, certainly, I guess, in relation to budget constraints. Is there anything policy-wise moving forward about libraries that we need to be considering?
And so you may recall, again, a couple of years ago, back in the budget setting proposals, there was a kind of marker in the sand put in one of those budget reports that said library proposals. There was no specific options being put forward at that stage, and there was no specific value placed on those, but we did say we would look at our delivery of library services. We undertook a needs assessment and did so in consultation with the Department for Culture, Media and Sports. We made some proposals back to the executive in terms of areas of potential reduction, should they wish to pursue those. They haven't been pursued at this stage, and they are not part of the budget coming forward for council. So as it stands, there are no proposed changes to library services for you to scrutinise.
Okay, well, so we can strike that off the list then, because that seems, it's certainly nothing going to come forward for at least 12 months, I wouldn't have thought. Good. Are there any other items that committee members think we should be looking at, please?
I'm confused now because
I'm sorry, Marcus. I had no intention to confuse you.
I'm easily confused, Chair. Now we're looking at I usually think that was coming at the forward work plan. But now the only thing I don't know whether, unfortunately, I don't know whether it was this committee or Climate and Place, where we talked about, I'm pretty certain it's this one, we talked about the building control function. By the look you're giving me, it was Climate and Place.
I think it must have been, we don't cover building control, do we, Chris? Okay, that must be Climate and Place. So, well, I mean, the good news for you, Marcus, is if the committees merge, you won't have to attend two. You'll only need to attend one, if you're one of the chosen. Right. Anything else on forward plans or trackers? Good. Thank you for your contributions. Right. We'll now move on to item 6, which is the housing landlord options appraisal. And Chris is going to introduce this. And we have members from our housing team here as well. So, Chris, you want to crack on?
Yes, thank you very much. So for those of you in the room, you know who I am, of course, but for those who might be listening online or playing this back later, and we have had quite a bit of interest in this, as you might expect. My name is Chris Hall. I'm the Executive Director for Community Place and Economy, and my portfolio of responsibility includes our housing stock and our landlord delivery models. So Federica gives her apologies for today. She's unable to attend due to a pressing work commitment.
but she is obviously the lead member for this area of work. So not only is she signed off the report, but is fully supportive of the content. We've also joined by a number of colleagues in the room. So Peter Hatch at the back is the Chief Executive of Homes in Somerset. Ben Lane sat next to him is the Finance Director for HIS. We will be using abbreviations, it's a long report. Andrew Polsford is here as the project manager, and Steve Partridge is here representing Savills, and Savills are the company who undertook the independent engagement for us. So today's meeting is the first step in the governance process, and it's a really exciting opportunity for us to deliver a consistent landlord model across Somerset. So it's been some time in the making. You might recall that there were numerous housing conversations that were undertaken at the point of unitary becoming into fruition. So it's a really exciting opportunity to bring these models together, and there are significant benefits identified throughout the report, not least of which is that consistency of approach for all of our Somerset tenants. A number of members in the room have made declarations of interest, so I just wanted again to clarify that Homes in Somerset is a wholly owned company of Somerset Council. It's not an outsource arrangement. It is a company that we own. So it's an arm's length management company. And as a result, we have 4 councillors that sit on the board. 3 of those are nominated through the annual nominations process, that governance process undertaken by Somerset Council to nominate councillors to external bodies. It's called an external body, but as you've heard me say already, it is our company. And we also have a co-opted member in Federica Smith-Roberts as well. I've mentioned already, it's been a long time in the making. Some of you, I hope, will have joined us for the launch meeting and briefings for all members back in May. And then we held a further briefing for all members in December to give you an advance notification of what the recommendations might look like. So we made commitments very early on, both with members and employees, to keep them updated about what we knew when we knew it. So we have notified employees of the content of this report and the recommendations contained within it. And we've done that through a range of briefings, much like the member briefings, but face-to-face briefings for the employee team as well. The purpose of the options appraisal was to look at the 2 existing operating models for landlord services, so that being the arm's length management company for the stock that the council inherited from Sedgemoor District Council, and then the in-house model that is delivering services for the in-house stock that was inherited from Somerset West and Taunton Council. Those 2 councils being the only districts that had retained their council housing stock historically. The intention was to bring those together. We felt that there was a better and more consistent approach to be gained by doing so, and we identified that there was the potential for efficiencies that could be driven out of that process. I will emphasise, though, that the efficiencies are managed through the HRA, so the housing revenue account being a subset of the general fund, and therefore any financial efficiencies are retained and ring-fenced, so the council can't draw upon those savings to be utilised in any other financial pressures that exist. Effectively, it's tenant money, and we don't do anything that is about tenants without tenants, and therefore there is a fairly substantial consultation and engagement process that has sat alongside this. So there are some efficiencies, but that is not to suggest that there was a problem with either model, and Savills review has identified that both of the models were performing well. So what we're able to do now as a council is identify which of those can deliver most effectively for a single Somerset approach. This was never a rescue of one or other models. And you can see that through the tenant satisfaction measures and the normal reporting that we do through the HRA to Scrutiny, Executive and Full Council. We asked for Savills to undertake an independent exercise to engage with our tenants. So we are required to undertake engagement and consultation in order to be able to reach a decision on these proposals. And we've done that, and we wanted to do that in an independent manner, recognising that there are people who are in senior positions who have experience of one or other model, and therefore to avoid any potential question of bias, we undertook an external procurement exercise, and Savills were appointed given their experience in this market arrangement. So they have delivered their reports to us, and we are proposing that council accepts the recommendation within their report to use Homes in Somerset as that delivery model, and we believe that to be an evidence-based approach. From that, if those recommendations were accepted, we would need to undertake some further consultation with tenants. That's identified in the recommendations, but I will come back to the recommendations towards the end. We've engaged with the unions through our joint consultative committee and with employees throughout the process. So they are engaged and aware of the proposals. And were this to be accepted by executive, and you'll probably be aware that the executive meeting has now moved from the 4th of March to the 11th of March due to government challenges around the budget setting process. If that acceptance goes ahead and those recommendations are approved, we will then commence formal consultation with employees. So all engagement with employees to this date has been informal. It's been to warm them to the idea and the principles, give them an understanding of the process, but formal consultation will only start once a decision is reached. So we intend to do that in what I'm referring to as the transition period. So that period between the decision being made, hopefully on the 11th, and then what we're proposing as a go live date for the transfer on the 1st of September, there are a range of activities that we need to undertake during that period of time. Formal consultation completion with tenants is one. Formal consultation and process with our staff group. We also need to look at a range of operational matters. We need a period of time to transfer data, make sure we've got property data in the right condition and position so it's accessible. We need to engage further with the regulator of social housing. So right from the outset, we have engaged with them and been following their processes, and we will continue to do so on this matter as we move towards decision. We need to look at the service level agreements that exist. So they're both landlord models, because it's a ring-fenced account and the HRA is separate, where they seek support of the council, they have to pay for it. So for example, payroll services are undertaken by Somerset Council, and there is a service level agreement that exists between the HRA landlord function and the general fund's payroll service. So there is a service level agreement that sets out what they'll do, and there is a financial transaction that occurs between those two accounts. That's important because as we start to look at this as a single model, we need to understand all of those service level agreements and what the implications might be when we start to bring those together into a single model. So there will be a significant period of activity in that transition period. That might mean that the 2P list, so the list of employees protected for transfer, changes during that time. So we know that some people are carrying out very specific functions for the HRA. They're really easy to capture and protect in that 2P arrangement. So 2P is the transfer of undertakings and protection of employment regulations, and they are effectively the rules that govern how we protect employees in business transfers. So it may be that during that process of looking at the SLAs, we identify other people that are protected. So we are committed to undertaking that properly. We have a work stream through our HR service looking at that, and we will use the consultation process as well to identify others that might benefit from those protections. So there is a lot of activity that will go into driving forward to transition date. We've got a project plan, project teams, risk registers, all of the things you would expect for a project of this scale. And that isn't solely from Somerset Council's perspective, that is fully engaged with the Homes in Somerset team and their board to ensure that they understand the responsibilities upon them. There are consultation requirements for them with our employees as well, because there is a slightly different arrangement being proposed when it comes to the trade staff. So it's really important that we have all of this set out, and I give you my assurance that that is happening behind the scenes. It's not all appended into this report process. I think it's long enough as it is, but it is all available to you should you wish. In terms of the finances, we never set out for this to be a financial business case, but what we did identify through the work that Savills undertook and also just through examination of our own finances, that having a single model is likely to deliver a more efficient financial model for us as a council, and savings will be identified. The report does talk about the level of savings that could be achieved through this process, but just so we're clear, in approving this report with executive, they will be asked to approve some one-off funding in order to deliver this change, but we will use the normal annual business process for setting the HRA budget, as well as forecasting the 30-year business plan. So We will use that normal process to set all of the HRA accounting as we would normally. It's either unhelpful or otherwise, I'm not sure yet, but the business planning exercise and the budget process is happening pretty much at the same time as this options appraisal report. So we have made the decision not to include the financial savings in the budget for 26-27 business planning exercise, just in case the executive decides to defer the decision or not to make a decision. So rather than write it in and have to extract it, we have not done so. We will commit to remodelling on the assumption that the business plan is progressed through the normal budget route and means. So there is a slight staging to some of these decisions. Nevertheless, the report identifies upfront costs in the region of 1.3 million, just under, to enable us to deliver this. That sounds quite high, but when we're looking at a delivered saving in a full year in the region of £3 million, it is a very quick payback process. And if we forecast that over the entirety of the HRA business plan, the benefit to the HRA and therefore tenants, ring-fence tenants' money, is in the region of £90 million. That is very significant. That enables us to make further decisions about how that money is invested. But the first thing we would do is increase our debt provision and debt coverage. So there is a requirement under the SIPFA rules that we have 125% debt coverage. So effectively the HRA is borrowing separate to the general fund for its investment programme and its capital programme, and we need to be able to provide sufficient debt coverage going into the future. We have 100% debt coverage currently, which means we can meet all of our obligations. I'm clearly talking for too long to cut me off. But we want to get to a position where that's 125%, and that will enable us to do so. Just want to draw your attention, if I may, to paragraph 72. Paragraph 72, there is an error, I'm afraid. It talks about debt being brought down to £100,000, but it has an M on the end of it. It's supposed to be 100 million. My apologies. It's an oversight in A, the drafting, and B, the sign-off. So we will amend that for the executive report. But that does show that the financial efficiencies are then reinvested, and that brings our current debt provision and debt rates down from 193 million down to 100 million over that forecast period. So that money is reinvested and protected, rightly so. I also want to make you aware in paragraph 29 of the report, and again, an apology, I just had it presented to me this morning, I didn't see it. It was the October 25 board away day, not 24. So a minor one, but nevertheless worthy of identification. And then to the recommendations. So the recommendations look complicated, as you might expect. Effectively, what we are asking for is consent from the executive to accept Savills recommendations and to engage with all of those people necessary, from tenants to employees to contractors to legal services, to enable this decision to be made and enacted. We will be putting some emphasis onto two of those recommendations, just so we're absolutely transparent. So 9A, when it goes to executive, will also have the line of subject to consultation with tenants, because that reflects the process we're required to follow. So that will be an addition into 9A. Doesn't substantially change the recommendation, but it's just for absolute transparency. And again, in recommendation E, we will add in agreements on tenant consultation and date of transfer. So it's just to be absolutely transparent, to make sure the right delegations are in place from council as we deliver what I hope to be a really exciting opportunity for our tenants. No doubt there's going to be lots of questions, but before I hand over, can I just make sure we're all reassured that this is not a change of council housing stock ownership. There are no suggestions in here that the stock is sold. The stock remains Somerset Council's as it always has been. It does not reflect a change in tenancies. So people who are tenants now will continue to be tenants into the future. Their security and their right to buy, all of the benefits that they have within their current tenancies are unchanged as a result of this process. It doesn't It doesn't reflect the change in tenant rents. So the rent setting process is an annual process by council, unrelated to this. So their rents will not go up as a result of this, should it be approved. And similarly with service charges, there are no proposed changes to service charges as a result of this process. There is a separate report on rent setting and service charges, and you'll be aware that there's a government cap in place anyway. So I think I'm going to stop there for a moment. I'm sure there are some things I've missed. Welcome questions, and we've got support of colleagues in the room as well. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you, Chris. Quite a comprehensive introduction or report there. Right, members of the committee, are there any particular questions you wish to pose? Well, Chris, what a job you've done. Marcus.
Go first then. Sorry, I thought, oh, they're bound to be a few people. Yeah, thank you, Chris. I was just actually talked about the £1.3 million cost, and I've been looking at what that was, and I couldn't, what that includes. Does it include redundancy payments? Does it include just general, I don't know, changing all the signs on the vans? So things like that. I just wondered how we suddenly got to 1.3 million, because I know it doesn't sound a lot in council speak, but it sounds quite a lot to the layman's terms for merging two things that are doing the same thing. The other question I got, it was the 2p, obviously all the staff getting 2p across. And I don't know whether this is a question for this committee or not, but obviously we've got a situation at the moment where we've had various the councils have been, I never know whether merged or taken over, but obviously we've got people on who may have had 2p contract. I mean, might have had a Sedgemoor contract, and now we've got people who might have had a Somerset West and Taunton contract, and they may be their terms of employment, I think that's the word I'm looking for, may have been different, and how we manage that, because you could have in essence some staff on one type of contract or with different benefits, that's the word I'm looking for, where the others, and how does an organisation like Homes at Somerset actually going to deal with that going forward? I did have another question as well, but I don't want to go on and we end up hogging it, or whether there's going to be opportunities. And I suppose you talk about a £90 million saving over the course of the business model, or which is obviously an awful many years. But I assume any savings we got, and we get back to my pet thing of why we're building more houses, I presume any savings we make can then be geared with the debt model, etc., to allow us to build a few more houses. And one final question, because you talked about consistency and a consistent landlord model across the county. I'll just point out that obviously we have in two parts of the county, we have various what's the word I'm looking for? That's the word I'm looking for, Chris. Thank you for that. That may have different landlord models, and we'll all hear from tenants how some may be better than others, and how, as a council, and whether that ends up being through Homes in Somerset, or whether how we can sort of regulise that, so we're not only looking at the postcode lottery of where you live, but the postcode lottery of who your housing provider ends up being, just by a quirk of what housing association, I found the name there, actually ended up having the houses. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, so just running through those. So I think the costs are identified from paragraph 54 of the covering report, and table 1 sets out the various costs. So there are costs to establish this process. It's in the council report rather than the Savills one. Those are broken down. There are upfront costs. At the moment, we aren't identifying any redundancy costs. We are saying we will pick up the cohort of staff that undertake the work, and we will transfer them. It may be that we identify that there are some redundancies in future. That would be subject to a separate business case. We are not asking to make people redundant as a result of this change at the moment, but there are upfront costs. Some of those are around IT or preparing for the regulatory inspection. Some are around staff resourcing. So though we're bringing things together, the employment model at a senior level might increase to start with, and then people will be promoted into those roles. We will then look at the organisational structure, and a lot of work has been undertaken in setting out what that organisational structure will look like. So there are some costs in the early stages, and the request effectively is to manage those upfront costs that would then be built into the model going forward. So they are very much one-off, and then are repaid. So the assumption being that the savings delivered repay the reserves. So hopefully that answers those. In terms of 2p, So Somerset Council came together from 5 authorities, and yes, you could walk around this building now and find, in theory, 5 people sat in a row, all on different terms and conditions, because the 2P protections endure. So it is for the organisation to ensure that those 2P protections are transferred. So if we are transferring in-house, and predominantly the in-house staff in this arrangement would be from Somerset West and Taunton. So there will be staff here that we call Somerset Council that are existing Somerset West and Taunton 2P transferees, and it's those protections that will be transferred to homes in Somerset. There will also be some people who have been employed directly by Somerset Council during the period of post-unitary creation, and it will be those terms and conditions that are protected and transferred across. So whatever the contract of employment is, if the employee is protected by 2P because the work is moving, their current terms and conditions will be protected. There is, as you would imagine, a heavily regulated process that surrounds that, and our HR teams are engaged with it, and Homes in Somerset will need to uphold those terms and conditions. It's worth bearing in mind that Homes in Somerset was created from Sedgemoor District Council, and their terms and conditions aren't broadly dissimilar to the ones that we have, but nevertheless, the protections are key in all of this. And we've got some experience here. You might recall that we transferred the development team from the in-house service across to Homes in Somerset last April. So there is experience of undertaking this transition, and that's worked really well in terms of the engagement and transfer process. The £90 million, so yes, that's over the MTF, sorry, it's over the 30-year business plan. So we are required as a council to set a budget for 1 year, have an MTFP or medium-term financial plan or strategy for 5 years, and then we're required to have a 30-year HRA business plan. So the 90 million is a reflection of the saving extrapolated over the 30-year business plan. So that's normal for an HRA. You wouldn't normally do that in a general fund service over that length of time, but that is the requirement on a housing service. So yes, £90 million is the saving. It's broadly £3 million a year at full run rate. It's actually slightly more, 3.45 at full run rate minus the transition years. So it's a substantial benefit. The council, through its business planning exercise, will need to determine what it wishes to do with that benefit. I'm sure if Councillor Smith-Roberts was here, she would be actively supporting your view that we should be growing housing stock, and therefore that additional saving could help contribute towards future borrowing need and servicing that debt for housing stock growth. That will be a different decision, but yes, the opportunity exists, therefore, for us to reinvest some of those savings over that business planning timetable. You mentioned about the consistency point. So when I raise consistency, I'm talking about that we the council have just over 10,000 homes, and we are managing those in an inconsistent fashion. Not a bad fashion. We've seen the reports that demonstrates that they're both well performing, but it is inconsistent. Inconsistent because it was born from 2 previous districts, and those districts respected the boundaries of their stock. Now we're Somerset Council, we are buying stock outside of those boundaries, and we're having to decide which model manages them for us. So you could, in theory, as that stock grows and merges together, we lose the boundary line, but you could have some tenants ringing the Homes in Somerset phone number for help and some ringing the council number for help, some applying one policy and another policy. So we believe consistency is key for our tenants, but it is a reflection of our stock rather than the registered providers. Registered providers exist within Somerset. Some of those were born from the large-scale voluntary stock transfers that occurred from historic districts. Some of those have just expanded their portfolios within Somerset. So we talk in this context of consistency of our Somerset Council approach to managing stock, but we don't have control, as you might expect, of those RPs. Thank you.
Mark, does that answer your questions? You happy? Oh, we'll bank that one then. Right, ladies and gentlemen, any other questions? Question on Fran Smith online, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is very interesting, and I think it's something that's been probably coming for a long time. However, I do have a couple of questions regarding our staff. obviously the impact is mostly on our tenants, but this is also going to impact our staff. And I think they are concerned as well. So I just wanted to know if you could perhaps give me a little bit more detail. If our existing HRA DLO staff are 2P to a third party, does this impact, sorts such as MD Group, does this impact on the pensions as pensions are different within councils than they are within a third party? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So the simple answer is no. So there is a 2P protection process which incorporates pensions. Pensions can be slightly more complicated as the requirement within 2P is to provide a suitable alternative pension scheme. However, what we know is that for those staff that are transferred across to homes in Somerset, they operate off of the local government pension scheme. And for those that would be proposed to onwards transfer to a contractor, the assumption at this stage is that they would either become gain admitted body status to the LGPS, or that they would have a pass-through arrangement, so they wouldn't be disadvantaged in that process. We need to work out exactly which of those two, but they would both provide the same LGPS protections.
Thank you.
Yes. Right, I've got one or two. I mean, in just to follow on the 2P thing. We've inherited, I mean, the whole purpose of bringing Somerset Council together was to bring together 5 separate councils. So I'm not surprised that we've got 5 different sets of terms and conditions. Am I naive in thinking that we're not going to try and consolidate these into one, or give people the opportunity to that? Because it strikes me, I mean, I worked in an organisation that was amalgamated, and different people working on different terms and conditions and hours and things like that was administratively complex and clearly cost the organisation money. Are there any moves to try and consolidate all the terms and conditions into perhaps something that replicates the best of the lot?
The simple answer to that is no. So the 2P protections, because they are governed in the way they are and they are a regulation, they are the king of all of this. So all of those are, sorry, not making any sense. All of those are the substantial protections that are provided to employees. An employer could undertake specific consultation with staff to say, we would like to engage with you to alter your terms and conditions. And it would be for an employee to be able to respond to that and determine whether that was suitable for them. So as an example, and I'm talking council now rather than this specific transfer, but we've had people who transferred in on their protected terms and conditions from their prior district and then have been promoted into a role they've applied for within Somerset Council, and in doing so, part of that promotion transitions them to the new Somerset Council terms. So there may be some consolidation over time on a promotion or job change basis, but as it stands at the moment, the council is not proposing to undertake consultation to standardise all of its terms and conditions.
I appreciate any exercise like that would have to be voluntary. You can't force people into it, but there are no plans to do that. That's good. You mentioned the extra 25% covering the debt, and you were hoping to finance that out of the 90 million that's coming in, or the 90 million savings, consolidation savings. And I'm sorry if I've missed it. How much is that figure likely to be?
Do you mean the debt coverage?
Yeah, the extra 25%.
I don't have Kerry with me, I'm afraid, so I'll need to go. I'll take that question away and come back to you. So at the moment, our debt is 193 million within the HRA, but I don't know what the annualised payment of that is, and therefore I can't, in the moment, calculate the extra 25%, but I will get you the answer.
No, I appreciate that, because clearly if you want to sort of bank this extra 25% on top of the debt and keep it there in your reserve, then clearly it does cut down the opportunities for investment back in the housing stock further down the line, which I think is probably what most of us here would want the outcome of this or one of the major outcomes of this exercise to be, apart from greater efficiency and bringing everybody together. Good. Are there any other questions? Yeah, yes, please, Mark.
I mean, obviously, I think I support this. I think it's a sensible thing to do. And I just, going back a year or two would it always seemed a sensible option. Just want to confirm that I assume this report could cost quite a bit of money. Is that covered in the costs? Apologies if it's in the report and I can't see it. Is that covered in the 1.3 million savings?
Yeah, so paragraph 57 identifies that we set out a budget, a revenue budget, so it's not so much a saving or upfront cost in the context of this report. It has already been funded from the HRA in the 25-26 financial year. But yes, £100,000 was set aside to fund this options appraisal. Not all of that was used for Savills contractor, so we're clear there were other costs associated with it.
I'm sorry, Chris, when are we going live with all this? I've forgotten.
So, assuming we get a positive outcome and decision from the executive on the 11th of March, the assumed go live date would be the 1st of September. There is a delegation there to me to allow me to move that date forward or backwards should that become necessary if we find some challenges in consultation. But the assumed date that we're all working to is the 1st of September 2026.
And are you envisaging another scrutiny committee report before that date to review progress or not?
Yes, so we would like to continue the use of the project steering group and the relevant scrutiny committee to give oversight to these arrangements prior to go live.
Are there any other questions before we move to the recommendations, of which there are many? Do you want me to read the recommendations, or are you all happy to take them as read, as in a block? In which case, the overarching thing is the scrutiny committee consider the following proposed recommendations, A to J. Scrutinise the proposal in the report and consider whether it wishes to make any additional recommendations to the executive. Simon, you're proposing. I'm assuming that there are no any other recommendations or comments to make to the executive. I get the sense that everybody's pretty happy with this. It's one of the main, well, it is, principal benefit of bringing all the councils together. We can do things like this and really save some money. So that's great. Okay, I have a proposer for the recommendations in Simon Coles, a seconder, Kathy Pearce. All those in favour, please. And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. And gentlemen, thank you for your attendance. I'm sorry we weren't able to tax you, but the report is thoroughly comprehensive, and I think everybody's pretty impressed with the work that's been done. So thank you all very much. Yes, of course. I think at that point, just to allow the room to clear, we'll take a 5-minute break if we may, and we will return here at, say, 20 past.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So Federica has asked me to read the following. So the past year has been a strong and steady one for communities, housing revenue account, culture, equalities and the diversity portfolio. With many of the services we oversee playing a vital role in supporting people's day-to-day lives and helping communities function safely and effectively. Much of this work is regulatory and operational by nature and often unnoticed when working well, but nevertheless essential to ensuring standards are met, services remain resilient and residents can live with confidence. Over the last year, these services have continued to perform reliably against the statutory and operational requirements, providing reassurance, consistency and continuity for the people we serve. Alongside these core services, culture, sports, leisure remain central to well-being across Somerset. Access to libraries, arts and cultural activity along with leisure facilities and the opportunities for physical activity contribute directly to both physical and mental health, helping reduce isolation and strengthen community cohesion and pride. Over the past year, we have continued to support and sustain these services, recognising that they are not only operational extras, but have an integral part of the healthy, thriving community. We've also continued to strengthen how we listen to residents, improve accessibility and embed quality and inclusion across everything we do. While there is much to be proud of in terms of performance and delivery, we are clear that there is much more to do, particularly in improving consistency of service, customer experience, and how we use insight and feedback to drive improvement. This report reflects both the solid progress made over the past year and the areas where we are now focusing our efforts to build on that foundation. Finally, I would like to place on record my sincere thanks to the teams across the portfolio for their professionalism, commitment and hard work. Many colleagues consistently going above and beyond in what are often challenging and complex roles. And it's because of their dedication, expertise and willingness to go the extra mile that we have been able to achieve the progress set out in this report. And whilst not covered by her statement, I would like to add my thanks to those within the portfolio who've been working tirelessly over the last week on the major incident on flooding. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you, Chris. Yes, it's unfortunate that Federica can't be with us today. The purposes of these sessions is to allow the committee to quiz the portfolio holder directly. And so therefore we obviously can't do that face to face. However, are there any questions that you would like to pose to her on the report? I'll caveat that if I may. I think for relatively short and straightforward questions, we can report and get an answer back. If there is something requiring, shall we say, more depth of a reply, then I think we may take the view that we invite Federica back to a face-to-face meeting at the next meeting. But as I say, let's see how the questions go, and we'll take a view on whether we're happy with a written answer or whether we wish to see her in person. Pauline Ham, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a quick one. She's saying in her report that whilst there's no actual requirement for reports, that they liaise closely with Fusion. And I've been led to believe that the state of the Strode Leisure Centre, that people have been slaloming around the buckets as they collect the water, and that the Strode Leisure Centre, which is obviously well used because it's central to a lot of people, seems to be not in a very good state of repair. I just wondered how liaison with us has any relevance, or if we just rely on the provider. Thank you.
Thanks. I don't know whether Chris is in a position to answer that particular question.
Yeah, if I may, I think it's probably best if we get a written response. My understanding is that they have a long-term lease of the assets and the assets are ours. There will be a split of responsibility, therefore, between those responsibilities for maintenance that are the landlords and those that are the operators. But I'll take that one away and come back with an answer for you.
I mean, it could just be the bad weather we've had lately. The roof of the building might not have been able to cope. It might just be a one-off event.
Okay, so specifically, your question is about the maintenance and input we have into the maintenance.
Input that we have if there are issues within the managed leisure centres, basically.
Okay. Rebecca, are we able to make a note of that? Pick it up from the recording. Okay, thank you. Tom.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I, as the opposition lead member, to Federica, I have monthly catch-ups with her anyway, so I ask a lot of questions. But I would just like to echo, well, actually, I'd thank her as well for being so transparent with me in our monthly catch-up meetings, and also to Chris and the team from the whole portfolio. As I'm relatively new to the portfolio, it's been quite a learning curve over these past couple of months, especially getting your head around the HRA. And obviously coming from a background of leisure, it's been really interesting to see how other leisure centres and leisure providers throughout the county, for example, I work for Freedom Leisure part-time, and so to see everyone active, it's been really interesting to see how different leisure providers across the county work. But it's also been quite interesting to know that I didn't know that crematoriums actually fall under this committee. So before I actually sat on this committee and actually was the opposition lead member, it was really interesting to see how wide this actually portfolio spans across the whole council department. But yeah, I'd just like to echo her thanks as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, I mean, the breadth of the portfolio, I mean, is that it doesn't necessarily always have a huge load of problems and issues associated with it, but nonetheless, there's a lot of work covered. And I think that does, as I said before, cause me a little bit of concern if that breadth of work is subsumed into the new scrutiny committee, that make sure things don't get lost. Anyway, Andy Kendall, please.
Well, thank you, Chair. I remember when the directors come in here for the two leisure companies, this is going on from what you're saying. And I specifically remember asking a question about the maintenance, especially in our leisure centre in Yeovil, and they said all gets fixed in a relatively quick time, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever. And I said, that's interesting. And I started to question a little bit more, and I was given the right to offer to write an email. So I emailed both directors and says, just one, for instance, the front door of the leisure centre in Yeovil has got a printed out sign, "Pull to open," which has been there for over a year now. I've questioned this going in there to the people, and they say, "Oh, we reported it, but nothing ever gets done." Now, I understand how people can come in and say how great they're doing, but underneath it all, they're not. And I still haven't had a reply of either of them. So that's me shut up, for instance. But I'm just bringing that up as a point that the maintenance, some maintenance is done, but there's also maintenance that's not done and never done. And it's the user. I mean, I know it's easy. It's like if this went wrong, you could put a notice out there saying, press the button or knock the door to get in. That's fine for a little while. But if you come back a year later and it's still got a sign there saying not to come in, it's, I don't know what the word is, you know, annoying.
Okay, so I think what we're consolidating down into is this council's, council's responsibilities in terms of maintenance and upkeep of the leisure centres, but also how we respond to issues that are responsibility of the tenant. And particularly, as you say, if there's a long running issue, what powers as landlord we have in order to resolve the issues. So I think that's a perfectly reasonable question to ask the portfolio holder. And since it comes from two different leisure centres, I believe, then it's clearly relevant. Tom.
Thank you, Chair. Just coming back to that, and obviously I'll declare an interest because I'm speaking about Freedom Leisure. That when I reported an incident where we had leaks on the roof at the leisure centre in Wincanton, the team were really responding on getting out there with the scaffolding, etc. But the problem they're having at the moment with the roof is that they can't do anything until I think it's more the summertime when the weather gets better because of the shape of our roof. But I think, Andy, I'm more than happy to, as the opposition lead member, if you email me, I'm happy to pass that on as well, to see if they will respond. I mean, they are working on stuff. It's just, I think there's a bit of a backlog at the moment. But just going back to this, I think that throughout the whole portfolio, and I will mention this to Federica, I think these are just certain little areas that I think we just need to keep an eye on. For, let's say, for example, the Octagon and also leisure centres, because I think this is where the problems are really occurring in the portfolio. Thank you.
Are you aware of problems with the Octagon? Because I was under the impression that the process was moving forward.
There's progress moving forward, but I think there's quite a lot more questions on that around that area, if you see what I mean.
No doubt we'll uncover some of those next time. Pauline?
I just want to say, in spite of that, thank you to Federica. She does a smashing job. She's got a huge portfolio and it's brilliant what the report.
Okay, are there any other questions or points to raise? Yeah, Marcus.
That was great first. Well, as I say, it's disappointing Federica can't be here because obviously a lot of the questions are answers that you want a political answer to and not, no offence, Chris, but Chris Hall answer to. And I think, and I think, whether we do invite Federica back, I mean, there's lots of questions. I mean, and again, you get a little bit parochial because I can't help the fact that I live that side that way. But, there's a nice report about CCTV. Well, that's all very quaint, but actually that's okay if you live in Taunton Burnham. And how does that affect? I'm sure there's other towns there not covered. Didn't see Yeovil's name in there. And actually, then you have a knock-on effect of that. Then actually you end up with more and more conditions being put on CCTV for licensees by the police, because actually the police need the CCTV coverage because they haven't got maybe adequate CCTV coverage in the towns, and therefore you have a big knock-on effect, and actually that's then putting pressure on individual businesses. We talked about sports and leisure. Lovely report. It's great. If again, no good if you live in Minehead. When Minehead had a swimming pool, I was 6 stone lighter. Could have been an age thing as well, perhaps. But although there is actually 6.5 stone lighter, but I know there's moves afoot. But then it always seems to grind to hold politically, and you'd think politically that to have a town of that size, or not just that, the town of that size, a whole bit of the county which hasn't got access to an easy swimming pool is a debate. To an easily used swimming pool is a debate that has to be happened, and it's a political decision. I found it was in talking about street cleaning, where a lot of that's being devolved now. And obviously then you've got different standards of street cleaning. And I do think that's something that the public notice. They notice if the streets are looking scruffy. You know, the amount of conversations of weeds we have at Minehead Town Council is unbelievable. It's probably the most talked about topic, weeds. And then we talk about business waste, and there's a lovely bit in there about business waste. But again, we're very conscious that as a business, there's a lack of competition in business waste, although there is one business that seems to be suddenly having more and more bins. So is that something? And fly tipping, and obviously we've had conversations before about we call them tip still, but I suppose there's an official name for them, household recycling centres, rather than the tip. This would be the tip to me. Which is great, but you look at the times they open and we talk about the increase of fly tipping, and then what's the cost of the increase in fly tipping, because actually the cost of going to a household recycling centre is too expensive for businesses, and therefore we end up in this vicious circle. You know, without wanting to sound like I'm joining reform and it was better in the old days. You could say that we wasted, and was there less fly tipping in the olden days? I don't know. I see Chris is making notes. I'm starting to get a bit worried now. So I'm not really expecting answers to those, but I do think that, and I think you'll recall, Chair, that as portfolio holders in the past used to sometimes dread scrutiny committees with anticipation of being interrogated, but actually there are decisions that I think are political answers and not necessarily an officer answer.
I would agree with you. I mean, we're a nice, cuddly committee. I mean, I know we have Henry here today, but I mean, you know, he's just subbing. No, but seriously, I think what you've just uncovered, and the point you made right at the outset, was that Chris can provide answers, detailed, factual answers about what's in the report. But in a way, what we really want to know is what the council's executive thinking is going forward, so that we can probe. I mean, libraries were mentioned early on. There's obviously been some work done on libraries, but we don't know what's likely to be coming forward. You mentioned leisure centre provision or swimming pool provision in areas that don't have it. Has the council got any ambitions in those kind of areas? And so I'm inclining to the view that I think we really ought to have Federica here to answer questions on, you know, her ambitions for this county and this council going forward. And it's very nice to have the report of what's been achieved so far, and I think as everybody agrees, I mean, we've done some splendid work here. Everybody's worked really, really hard, and the outcomes are great. But actually, the other side of the coin is where are we taking this? Where are we going from now on? So I think what I'm going to do is I will ask her to come to one of the two remaining meetings to talk about, you know, the ambitions going forward, bearing in mind we've got an elections in 12 months' time. Now, Dawn Denton had her hand up online, but it's now gone down again. Dawn, did you have a particular question or item to raise?
No, thank you. My question was already answered, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Right. Are there any other questions or queries? Chris, did you want to respond to some of the things that Marcus raised?
No, I think that having the portfolio holder here for a future meeting is the way to do it, to go through. I've recorded some of the topics you want to discuss so that she can be prepared to have that when she comes to the next meeting.
That's fine. Thank you very much. Right. Unless there are any other specific topics related to the community's portfolio, we'll move on. We touched on the item 8 is the community's work programme. We touched on this earlier as part of the outcome tracker. So I just wanted to give you a sort of final opportunity to raise things that may have come out of the meeting. We did talk about, for example, picking up on the housing options appraisal that goes forward, and Chris says that'll be coming back here, so that will go on the Scrutiny Communities work programme to be handed over. Are there any other particular items that we perhaps didn't touch on earlier that you'd like to discuss? Okay, well, I've got a couple, which I have to say I've only came to me as we were talking about the options appraisal. So the first one, I think committee members were copied in on an email from a gentleman, I think out Froome Way, who had an issue with housing. I have absolutely no wish to delve into the complaint at all, but what he raised was his view that the complaints process was inadequate, and somehow not fit for purpose. Now, I've had a response back from the customer service manager, Rebecca Martin, explaining how it's all supposed to work. So the question I have to ask is to whether you as a committee wish to have a look at the complaints policy, which I think is about 18 months old, with a view to testing its adequacy, because this is not the first complaint I've had in relation to this. One of the people in my ward was very upset about having their complaint upheld, and then querying 6 months later why nothing had been done about it. It was told to go through the process all again because it had been closed. So whether this is a problem with the policy or whether it's a problem with how it's implemented, I'm not entirely sure, but I'm slightly worried that there's a kernel of something in here. What I don't know, and what I'm looking to our officer colleagues for advice is whether this is actually a matter for this committee in terms of the fact that it is a complaints policy, or whether it's constitution and governance to look at this. And that's what I would like some advice on, please.
My recollection, Chair, and I'm prepared to be wrong, but my recollection was that the complaints policy did come via this committee the last time it was reviewed, and so therefore I would suggest it is. We can obviously look at that behind the scenes, but I do believe it is this committee.
On that basis, sorry, I'd like to put that on the forward plan then, please. Okay, and another thing I've raised with Chris is actually portfolio commissioning plans. Now, we look at these in different ways, but by every portfolio executive area will have a forward plan going forward, in particular in relation to the contracts that it's hoping to issue or intending to issue, either as new or as repeat over the succeeding 12 months within the financial year. And I think these are the kind of things that would be quite useful for scrutiny committees to have an eye on, not least the new ones, and also the operation of the old ones. Now, I've mentioned this to Chris, and I think we had a slightly sort of misunderstanding of what I was after. But to clarify it, your portfolio will have a list of contracts that you enter into every year. And I think it would be quite useful for this committee just to have an idea of the breadth of contracts that you enter into, and if we feel inclined to perhaps ask a few more questions about how they operate and what they're supposed to be doing. Does that make sense? That makes that okay with you, Chris?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, Marcus.
Got one, sort of the previous report, I sort of wrote down, there was a couple of items in there and I thought, well, that's resource issue and I don't want to pick on individual departments or whatever, but if there's resource issues, and by that we mean people and staff, etc., to do the job, and obviously it doesn't take much, you've got environment, health and licensing in there. That's just an example, but actually probably a bit annoying, it should have been brought up in the item earlier, is what about things like housing and how are they with resource, and how many vacancies do we have at any one time, and are we filling them, and how quickly are they getting filled? Because it's all very well, we often hear the excuse we just haven't got the people to do it, but actually what are we doing about that? And actually if there's vacancies that aren't being filled, how are we dealing with that? And I don't know whether that should have been brought up earlier, but it's not really about one specific department, it's more general about loads of departments that are probably covered by this committee.
So sorry, you're talking about vacancies in terms of council house vacancies as against the waiting list? Sorry, misunderstood.
I'm on officer, in officers. So whether that be licensing officers, environmental health officers, housing officers, officers generally across, that's probably all feeding into these departments, and how and does anyone, are we filling them quickly enough? And are there many out there? So are there many out there, and are we filling them quickly enough? And are we putting extra pressure on current officers because of the delays?
Okay, this is a staff complement issue. I mean, I don't know what the full staff complement is supposed to be and how many vacancies we carry at any one time, or whether any particular department has more vacancies than others, and to the extent that it's unable to function as it should. I'm not sure that's for us. I suspect that's for, I don't know, Chris?
Um, we could provide that information. So whether it also fits into a wider scope for the council and a different scrutiny, it could do. But actually, if your interest is specific to community, place and economy and the services within your portfolio, we could provide that data. We get that through our HR system. So we could provide you with information around the current establishment, number of vacancies, hard to recruit areas, the plans that we are putting in place, recruitment and retention allowances, etc. So we could provide that if that was of interest.
Well, I think if that's, I mean, relatively easy to come, I think we'd be very interested. I mean, if, you know, for example, if licensing was running 2 officers short, and we all know planning has got seems to have a permanent problem, I think that would be very considerable interest. I'm getting lots of nods around the table. So yes, we can take that forward. Thank you, Marcus. Are there any other suggestions that we should be looking at? We're on. We seem to have given ourselves quite a lot of work so already. Okay, right. Well, if that's that, I will draw the meeting to a close. Thank everybody for your contributions, and look forward to seeing you again on the 26th of March in here for our next meeting. And get home safely. Hope it's not too damp wherever you live. Thank you. Bye.